not in a Christian woman's faith?
It very much can, Joyce, and thanks for bringing this up. I remember sitting in a green room. I was at a women's conference, and a young wife and mother came up to me and said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "Well, my husband and I are struggling with whether contraception is something that we as Christians should do at all. There are a lot of different messages out there. There's the side that this young wife was struggling with. Is contraception just the idea of intercourse without pregnancy? Is that even okay? And then there's, of course, so much on the other side where everything goes, and the morning after pill and IUDs and whatever goes. And I think Christian women can really benefit from some thoughtful thinking through of the issues behind it. And that's what I try to do in this chapter of Dr. Carroll's Guide to Women's Health.
And you do a great job. And of course, you steer us all through everything: the IUDs, the hormonal implants, the hormonal injections, the barrier methods, the oral contraceptives, all of that, and much, much more. And again, this is Dr. Carroll's Guide to Women's Health. If you would like to go to Amazon, I'm sure it's available there, and any of your favorite bookstores. But Dr. Carroll, let's talk about infertility just a bit too, because a lot of women struggle with that. Why is that we struggle with that seemingly more so today than ever before? At least to me, are we impatient and we want, when we want a child, it's like we want it now? And so we jump to infertility methods, or, is it because something that we're eating has changed our biological, our anatomy in some way that people are finding it more difficult to get pregnant?
Well, you are right, Joyce. About 1 in 7 couples struggle with infertility, meaning that after a year of trying, they're unable to conceive a pregnancy with just trying on their own. That has become a little more common increasingly over recent years, and there's probably several reasons for that. One is that certain numbers of women are waiting longer to have children, and there can be some real benefits to waiting. When you're 20 years old, raising a child is tough. There's a lot of maturity that you can still benefit from. But on the other hand, when women pour all of their energy into their career and delay childbearing until, say, their late 30s or early 40s, getting pregnant at that age becomes so much more difficult. And there has been a certain group of women who has, for good reason, chosen to delay having children. And so the age factor becomes a real issue. Sadly, there's also the issue of sexually transmitted diseases, which are much more common than we would like to believe, and that can create damage to the reproductive organs and make things more difficult. There's also another factor that's a little hard to pin down, but I believe is very real. There are a lot of chemicals that we become exposed to that we weren't exposed to, say 50 years ago or before. There is some increasing evidence that those what we call endocrine disruptors that may be in the receipts we get at the ATM or the gas pump or the plastic bottles that we drink, that increasing amounts of those substances may make it much more difficult for a woman to conceive when she chooses. That's a hard thing to stay away from in our modern society, but it probably does have a factor, at least for a lot of women.
Right. Well, if someone is struggling with that, but really doesn't want to go the infertility route, and what do you have any advice for them? Are there some foods they should eat? Are there some foods that they should avoid? Any tips for that?
Certainly, and that's a perfect question. I would recommend thinking of eating clean. That means limit the processed food as much as you can. If it comes in a package, if it's got a long shelf life, it's probably processed, and it probably has a lot more chemicals. If you move away to clean food, meaning fruits and vegetables and lean protein, lean meat, that whole grain bread, and limit the processed food, you will limit those chemicals entering your body, and you will also give your body the nutrients that will maximize your ability to have normal reproductive function. There are there is one particular supplement that I believe has some good research behind it to help women where ovulation may be a problem. That's not all infertile women, but for those women where ovulation is a problem, myo-inositol is a very helpful one, and there's a couple brand names. You don't have to buy the brand name, but that is one that can be helpful, and so that is something that I can recommend.
Great. Well, because I know that there are women listening to that would like that. Now, can some infertility treatment, we've heard differing stories about that. Can infertility treatment affect a mother's health in the future? Because we've heard, incidences of ovarian cancer, and they are trying to relate it back to the infertility treatment.
That's a great question. The oral medications that are sometimes used to stimulate ovulation, such as Clomid, have been linked to a slight increase of certain cancers, possibly. The data is very, very sketchy. It's not at all clear. But the good news is that is only a factor for women who have used it for a long period of time, meaning 9 months or a year of continuous treatment. Using the injectable medications does not have that same kind of link. So what I tell my women when they ask about that question is, if you in your heart feel like this infertility treatment is something you want to go through, let's plan on a given number of months. And if God wills and you get pregnant during that time, we'll celebrate, but not to plan it indefinitely.
All right. Well, I know that we're about to come up on a break now, so I don't want to dig into menopause too much right now, but we are going to talk about that, Dr. Carol, because a lot of women, they feel like a blanket's just been pulled over their head, and, once menopause hits them, and they kind of lose their way. And a lot of women do. I mean, literally, they just lose their